In the early years of the 20th century, the world was gripped by a fever of exploration. The great blank spaces on the map, vast deserts, high mountains, and endless oceans, were slowly being conquered by brave adventurers who risked everything to push the boundaries of human endurance. Yet, among all these unknown frontiers, there was one place that seemed more mysterious, more unreachable, and more hostile than all the rest: Antarctica. This frozen continent, larger than Europe, was a land of eternal ice and blizzards. It was a place where temperatures could fall below -50 degrees Celsius, where no tree or flower grew, and where the very ocean itself froze into towering walls of pack ice. Very few humans had ever set foot there, and none had crossed its vast interior. To many, it was a place to be feared. But to one man, it was the ultimate challenge. His name was Sir Ernest Shackleton. Shackleton was not a stranger to the polar regions. Born in 1874 in Ireland, he had grown up with a restless spirit, a hunger for adventure, and an unbreakable confidence in his own abilities. As a young man, he had already sailed with Robert Falcon Scott on an earlier Antarctic expedition, where he proved himself resilient but also learned firsthand the dangers of the ice. Later, he had led his own expedition, reaching farther south than anyone before him. But there was still unfinished business. The South Pole had been reached by Roald Amundsen in 1911, and Shackleton knew that the next great prize lay in something even more ambitious: a transcontinental crossing of Antarctica, from one side of the frozen land to the other, across nearly 1,800 miles of unknown terrain. It was a dream that seemed almost impossible. To achieve it, Shackleton would need a ship strong enough to penetrate the ice, supplies to last more than 2 years, and men willing to face almost certain hardship and danger. Yet Shackleton believed he was the man to succeed. He once famously wrote, "Difficulties are just things to overcome, after all." Recruiting the crew. When Shackleton began preparing for the expedition in 1913, he placed a small advertisement in a London newspaper. According to legend, it read, "Men wanted for hazardous journey. Small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger, safe return doubtful. Honor and recognition in case of success." Whether this exact ad was ever printed is debated, but the response was overwhelming. Hundreds of men applied, eager to join Shackleton's mission. Some are skilled sailors, carpenters, and scientists. Others were ordinary men, simply longing for adventure. Shackleton personally interviewed many of them, choosing not only for skill, but for character. He wanted men who could endure hardship, who could keep their spirits high even when facing despair. Among those chosen were men who would later become legends of survival. Frank Worsley, the brilliant navigator; Frank Wild, Shackleton's loyal second-in-command; Tom Crean, an Irish giant of strength and courage; and a host of others who would prove their worth in the trials ahead. In total, 28 men were selected to join Shackleton on what he called the Imperial Transantarctic Expedition. The ship Endurance, the vessel that would carry them south, was a specially designed ship named the Endurance. Built in Norway, she was one of the strongest wooden ships ever constructed, with a hull nearly 2 feet thick, reinforced to withstand the crushing pressure of polar ice. Shackleton had chosen her carefully, believing she could endure the worst Antarctica had to offer. Little did he know just how true that name would become. The Endurance was small by modern standards, only about 144 feet long, but she was sturdy, equipped with a coal-fired engine, 3 masts, and room for supplies that would last more than 2 years. Shackleton had filled her with sledges, dogs, tents, skis, scientific instruments, and enough food to sustain the crew through their crossing. Pressure of polar ice. Shackleton had chosen her carefully, believing she could endure the worst Antarctica had to offer. Little did he know just how true that name would become. The Endurance was small by modern standards, only about 144 feet long, but she was sturdy, equipped with a coal-fired engine, 3 masts, and room for supplies that would last more than 2 years. Shackleton had filled her with sledges, dogs, tents, skis, scientific instruments, and enough food to sustain the crew through their crossing. A world at war. In August 1914, just as Shackleton was preparing to sail, the world was thrown into chaos. The First World War erupted in Europe, and nations were calling their young men to battle. Shackleton offered his ship and his crew to the British government for military service. But to his surprise, Winston Churchill himself sent word that Shackleton's expedition should go ahead. Even in wartime, the spirit of exploration was seen as vital for Britain's pride and leadership. And so, with the blessing of the government, Shackleton and his men set sail from London in the summer of 1914. Families waved farewell from the docks, not knowing that it would be years before these men returned, if they returned at all, into the unknown. The Endurance sailed first to Buenos Aires, Argentina, and then farther south to the stormy seas of South Georgia Island, a lonely outpost of the whaling industry in the South Atlantic. Here, Shackleton gathered final supplies and learned more about the dangers ahead. The whalers warned him that the pack ice in the Weddell Sea was worse than usual that year, dense, unpredictable, and impenetrable. Shackleton listened, but his determination never wavered. On December 5, 1914, the Endurance left South Georgia and headed into the icy waters of the Weddell Sea. The ship plunged into a world of floating icebergs, fierce winds, and freezing waters. At first, the crew marveled at the beauty of this frozen wilderness, towering blue gel. Glaciers, playful penguins, and seals basking on floes. Spirits were high, and the men sang songs, played music, and kept their sense of humor alive. But as the days passed, the ice grew thicker. The open sea narrowed into lanes between floes, and the ship was forced to zigzag through a labyrinth of ice. At times, the men had to climb out onto the floes themselves, hacking and prying to open a path. Still, Shackleton remained confident. He believed that if any ship could reach the Antarctic coast, it was the Endurance. Yet the ice had its own plan. As January 1915 dawned, the Weddell Sea tightened its grip. The Endurance, caught in the shifting pack, came to a halt. Day by day, the pressure increased, squeezing the wooden hull with a force greater than iron. Shackleton's dream of marching across Antarctica was already slipping away, but he refused to give up. With calm determination, he told his men, "We must wait for the ice to release us, and while we wait, we shall endure." Little did they know, this was only the beginning of a 2-year struggle for survival, one that would test every ounce of their strength, courage, and unity. And so, with their ship trapped in the jaws of the frozen sea, the greatest survival story in history began.